Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Our Sheikh often referred to himself as the Ant-Man. The point being that he considered himself small. And it was in that smallness that the great unity can be understood. Arrogance is a block to our being able to find unity in existence. Arrogance is a block to wisdom. Arrogance is a block to the expansion of our consciousness. Why? Because arrogance believes that everything is known at this moment and that we are in control of this moment. And as long as that goes on, as long as we feel we are in control of the moment and that we control the moment and actually have great understanding of what's going on, there is no progression. It's only when we become small, when we become humble, that we're able to understand and get into the reality of existence. There was once a slave whose name was Ayaz, and he became a favorite of the king. And he was put in charge of the treasury within the palace. And it seemed that he would go to the treasury almost every day, unlock the door, and spend an inordinate amount of time in there and then come back out. The other people in the palace who saw this going on began to tell the king that he's spending an enormous amount of time in the treasury. He must be stealing, probably just a little bit of the time, but it all adds up. He continues to steal and he will diminish your treasury. The king, who had great faith in him, couldn't believe this. So in order to satisfy the doubters and to satisfy himself, he created a hole so that he could see through the wall into where the treasures were kept after Ayaz went in there. And this is what he saw. He would walk in and go to where the jewels are and open up one of the drawers. And inside of it were clothes, old, worn, ragged clothes. And he would say, before I met the king, this is what I wore. And because of the king's kindness, I have been elevated. Let me never forget where I came from, and let me never forget what I owe the king for putting me into the position that I am now. When he came out, the king told him about the fact that everyone had been accusing him of stealing and that he had watched what he was doing and he saw what he was doing. And he said, you know, you won my confidence before by the way you acted, but now you've also won my heart. And you've also made me understand that I am also a slave to that great king, to our Lord, to our Rab, and I must become small and humble in the way that you are. Humility can take us to the truth. Arrogance will take us deeper and deeper into illusion. We begin to think all of our decisions make sense. We begin to think that everything we think is appropriate. There is a resonance that goes along with truth that affects everything around it. In the Bible, there's a story of Daniel in the lion's den. And he was thrown into the lion's den as punishment by the king at that time. But when he was in the den, the lions all of a sudden were tame, and they were without their usual lion propensity. Why? Because of the nature of Daniel, because of the resonance of Daniel, and because of the interaction with that resonance by the lions, they became different. It's like that when there is an encounter with a true sheikh, with a true guru of wisdom. His resonance is such that it changes our state of being. It changes our state of being so that we become more like him. We become more in line with reality. We become more in line with the truth. How do we move forward to create a situation for ourselves so that we can understand the nature of reality? The Sheikh has told us that our life is an act. Many wise men have told us that we are robotic in our nature. We repeat what we've been taught, we repeat what we've been shown, and we live within this repetition as if it were our existence. How do we escape from the illusion that we're tied to and from the trap that is the mind that cannot deal with the higher states, but can only deal with the illusory world? What needs to be done? Well, one of the things that needs to be done is we have to become small. We have to enter into a state of humility. We have to understand God's qualities as opposed to understanding our own arrogance. After we have learned about compassion and about mercy and about the true qualities of the true nature of Allah, about justice, about kindness, about love, it becomes easier to step away from our egocentric self. And one of the things that we need to do is create a watcher within us that watches our interaction with the world in the same way that we watch the world. So here we are, and we see what's going on around us, and we make determinations as to what's going on around us. We critique the world. We critique the world and come to conclusions. However, this mind, which is that critic, doesn't really have an opportunity to look at itself. The mind can't look at itself, but we have within us the ability to watch ourselves and to segregate ourselves from our mind consciousness and watch our mind consciousness. To do this, we have to be able to become still enough to separate ourselves. If we are in constant turmoil, it can't happen because we're too confused, too upwrought, too much involved with what we're doing to take the time to separate ourselves from ourselves. We have to become a witness to ourselves. And once this begins to happen, we begin to separate ourselves from our egocentric self. Let's say we're a little neurotic, and let's say that we are involved in some sort of obsessive compulsive behavior, like brushing your teeth for an hour and a half, as opposed to just brushing your teeth for a few minutes. While the mind is in that loop of obsessive compulsive behavior, the mind can't escape from it. But if you separate yourself from the mind and you can say to yourself, my God, look what I'm doing. Why am I doing that? Who is doing that? Is that who I am? Is that the reality of me? Well, we need to be able to look at ourselves in that critical way as to everything that we do, as to our relationships with other people, as to our relationships with our family, as to the way we react to things. Now, wisdom is the dawning of understanding reality. Being caught in the mind is just the opposite. It is being trapped within a dark place that is full of fragments of ideas and scenarios that we have established as reality. But to separate ourselves from that is a difficult and great work that is incumbent on each of us in order to find reality, in order to find the truth. So, can we sit back and watch the way we act in the same way that we watch the world, in the same way that we look at the world and critique the world? Can we just be aware of our own actions in a way that we are not tied to them as if they were somehow ourselves? This disconnect from our self is the beginning of understanding reality. This disconnect from our mind is the beginning of understanding reality. And unless this disconnect occurs, we will constantly be trapped in the hallucinations of our mind, the arrogance of our mind, the egocentric nature of our mind, and the insistence in our mind that what we are doing is appropriate and correct. How do we make this disconnect? How do we create within ourselves this watcher? How does this witness within ourselves occur? Well, the witness is there, and the witness has been there. We, each of us individually, have to become cognizant of the fact that we can watch our mind and we can watch ourselves. And until we become cognizant of that, we are susceptible to, and we are under the control of, the repetitious nature of what goes on in our head. This is how so many interesting phenomena have happened in religion, for instance, in ritual, for instance. There's a story that I've told before, but it makes the point. There was a sheikh who was giving discourses, and he had a cat, and the cat would be a great problem because he would run all over the place and he would make noises and he would scratch people. So they decided that at the beginning of the discourse, they would always tie up the cat outside to a tree. Well, this went on for years, and every day before the discourse, the cat would be tied to the tree. Well, this sheikh died, and another sheikh took his place, and the cat died. They got another cat, and they tied the cat up, the new cat up to the tree. And it became part of their ritual that they had to have a cat, and they had to tie him up to the tree before the sheikh could give a talk. And it's like that. If you look at religious sects or religions in general, you'll find that there are certain idiosyncrasies within religions that have become part of the religion, and they've become incredibly important in the religion, but in truth, they have no meaning. The length of hair, the growing of hair. There are sects that never cut their hair, tie it on their head, and put a turban on top of it. There are other sects that shave their heads. On and on. What is the length of the robe that you wear? What is the length of the tail of the turban that you wear? All of these things are part of what becomes important because we haven't been able to watch ourselves and understand what's truly important. If we watch ourselves, we can see to what extent have we entered into unconditional love. To what extent do we do things out of self-motive? To what extent have we allowed ourselves to grow to understand the nature of the unity of ourselves and other men? To what extent have we gone in the appropriate directions, and to what extent have we continued to follow the way of the mind and the way of what we've been taught by our interaction with our community? Have we been able to go beyond that? In Sufism, we begin to understand that there is a space beyond religion. There is a space beyond the Shariat observance. There is a space that is clearer and cleaner and purer than the ritualistic religion that we follow. We have to find that space. We can't find that space with our mind. We can't understand the true nature of compassion with our mind. We can't understand the true nature of mercy with our mind, the true nature of love, the true nature of unconditional love. The mind is very good at quid pro quo. You do this for me, I do this for you. You love me, I love you. But to be able to go to the point of I love you, period, is a transcendent into a higher state of being. And we need to be able to make that transcendence into the higher state of being. Watching ourselves allows us to be able to critique where we are and where we're at. We can see our petty, small ways that we act. We can see how we defend ourselves constantly, how we do things in defense of ourselves, and how we do things to raise the importance of this being that we call ourselves. But when we can watch ourselves in the same way we watch others, things change for us and perspective changes. It's like climbing a mountain. The higher you get on the mountain, the more you can see. So the further we can get away from ourselves, the more we can see of ourselves. You see, we have spent a lifetime creating ourselves. And this is what we associate with. We associate with our jobs. We associate with our ethnic groups. We associate with our religion. We associate with our language. We associate with the part of the world we come from. We associate with so many things, and all of these pile up and they become who we are. But in truth, that's not who we are. We are, when we get to know the truth of ourselves, we are a creation of our Creator who has made us in His form so that we can come to know Him. And what is His form? His form is formless. There is no form. So as long as we associate with form, we can't come to know the truth of ourselves. Who am I? Am I this beard? Am I this nose? Who am I? Who in truth am I? This question can't be asked by the mind. This question can only be asked outside of the mind. So we have to become resolute in the idea that we will set up a witness that watches our being. And then we can find out more about who we really are. The fact that you can go to that place where you can watch this being that you walk around in, the fact that you can watch it from a space outside of it should let you know that this is not who you are. So if we become interested in finding out who we are, we have to become witnesses to who we're not. And doing that takes great determination and takes perseverance. And then it takes realizing what is going on. And this is how wisdom dawns. And it comes from being small. It comes from understanding truth. And then the way you understand things changes. Bayazid was an important early Sufi, and he was walking on his way to Hajj, and he ran into a dervish. And the dervish said, "Where are you going?" And he said, "I'm on my way to circumambulate the Kaaba. I'm going on Hajj." And the dervish said to him, "All you have to do is walk around me, and it'll be the same as going on Hajj." And Bayezid understood the truth of that, because he understood that the man who he was talking to was in a state of reality. And he circumambulated that man, and then he went back home. And when he went back, they said, "Well, did you go on Hajj?" And he said, "Yes." They said, "Did you circulate the Kaaba?" He said, "Yes, I circulated a living Kaaba." And this is a change in normative reality. This is outside of normative understanding. This does not fall in line with the way things are explained and the way things are understood. But this can happen when you understand the unity of all existence and you are able to live simultaneously outside of yourself. And you let go of yourself and you create an awareness as to what's going on without all of the intricacies of your own self motive. Whenever we deal from the egocentric self, everything that we do is done in some way to enhance this being that we call ourself. But when we begin to understand that this being that we call ourself is not who we are, we enter into a new phase of existence. It's almost like being reborn. You now don't see yourself as this bag of bones and skin and flesh and organs, but you see yourself in another state. You see yourself differently. You see yourself as an awareness that sees everything simultaneously, like standing on the top of a mountain. You see more, you understand more, and then you can begin to understand the nature of Allah's qualities and how, in fact, the awareness of those qualities is what you are meant to become. The form of those qualities is what you are meant to become. You begin to understand that there is no ownership of things, that all the treasures in this creation are His. All that's been made is His. And you can watch this through your awareness outside of your body. But then as we go into trauma, as we have difficulties, as we try to deal with our daily existence, we lose that awareness because we're scrambling to try and figure out how to solve the problems that we have, how to solve the anxieties that we have, how to solve the difficulties that we have, how to solve all of the upside down things that are going on with us. And we come to solutions which are constantly egocentric centered. And it's the same way for men as it is for countries. people resolve difficulties through wars, as if wars will somehow straighten out a situation, as opposed to just making things worse. We cannot detach ourselves from our relationship to our egocentric self as an individual, as a people, as a country, as a world. This constant association with who we are as individual beings keeps us from becoming unified. The sin of separation grows and grows and grows among men, and everyone considers themselves separate from everyone else and somehow more important than everyone else. People stake claim to their homelands, and their homeland is the most important place in the world. And I remember Bawa once telling us, the only homeland anyone really has is their mother's womb. And when they begin to understand that, a lot of this identifying with country and state will begin to dissipate. So we need to individually stop identifying with all of the things that we've held on to as those things that determine who we are. We need to identify in a new way. We need to identify with the form that is Allah. We need to identify with the qualities that are Allah. And these qualities and these forms are in a non-form state. They're not elemental. They're not illusory. They are eternal, and they are godly. And God is without form. So when we can begin to identify with that which is formless, we can then begin to identify with the truth. We can then begin to identify with reality. This body disappears. There's no question about it. This body disappears. And if we identify only with this body, then we disappear. But if we identify with that power that is the truth, that is formless, if we can find that part in ourselves, then we identify with that which is eternal. So we have to start watching ourselves and understanding how we are constantly acting through self-motive because of our egocentric self. And as we give that up, as we give up the need for that, all of the things that come with that will also disappear. All of the difficulties, all of the sorrow, all of the anxiety, all of the trauma that comes with identifying with this body will begin to disappear, because now we identify with things that have no anxiety, God's qualities, that have no trauma, God's qualities, that have no sorrow, God's qualities. We identify with that which is real, that which is truth, that which is eternal. May it come to pass that we all learn how to do this, and that we all find our truth in reality and our truth in God's qualities, and we become intermingled with God's qualities. And then we can become the truth. May it be so for each and every one of us. Ameen, Ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.